Welcome to Ask Ally, the self-publishing advice podcast from the Alliance of Independent Authors. I'm Howard Lovey, and this week it's our monthly advanced publishing salon with news and views, tips and techniques for experienced indie authors. Our advanced self-publishing salon is brought to you by specialist sponsor Ingram Spark, an award-winning indie publishing platform that offers authors like you a way to publish your book and share it with over 39,000 bookstores and libraries worldwide. It's your content. Do more with it. We would like to thank Ingram for their support for this show. And now, here are your hosts for the Advanced Salon, Ally Advisor Joanna Penn and Director Orna Ross.
Welcome to the Alliance of Independent Authors Advanced Self-Publishing Salon with me, Joanna Penn, and Orna Ross. Hi, Orna.
Hi, Joanna. Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone. And this time we are focusing on a new topic. Focus on your strengths as an indie author, ways to beat comparisonitis. And this is a super important topic because we're always comparing ourselves to others. So we will get into the topic in a minute. But first up, we always like to give you some news and what's happening. So, Orna, what's happening with Ally?
I guess the biggest thing always around this time of year is SelfPubCon, our self-publishing advice conference. So we are right in the thick of preparation. It's on the 23rd, 24th of October, so just around the corner. And we've got a fantastic lineup of speakers and sponsors and all sorts of interesting things happening at selfpublishingadviceconference.com if anybody hasn't registered already for their 3 free days. And we've also been, our latest short guide for authors is children's book publishing, which is one we've been asked for a while, and we worked on that with the wonderful Karen Inglis, our children's book advisor, and that is back from the editor now and shortly about to go. So
oh, that's great. And you know, I think this is one of the big shifts. We always talk about what's changed in a decade of indie, and when we started out, it was really hard for children's authors. The wisdom was don't do it because it's actually really hard. And now, as Karen's shown, and a lot of the indies in the community, children's books are having a real heyday. You know, indie children's books, there's a lot of opportunity. So I'm excited about. I'm not doing any, but I'm excited for people to get that guidebook because I think that's super important.
I think it's really interesting. It's one of the things we're going to be talking about a little bit later on in the show, is that it is possible to succeed as an indie at anything. It's really, anybody who says indies can't do this, that or the other are wrong. And the most interesting thing about children's books is that it's still 80 to 90% print. And yet, people like Karen have sold now into 6 figures,
hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, hundreds of thousands. Okay, I haven't been keeping an eye on her. Every time I look at her website, the number she sold has gone up. Hundreds of thousands. And definitely she would have been told that it just wasn't possible to do that. So, important.
Yeah, that is coming out. So I have put out The Relaxed Author this month with Mark Leslie DeFave, and it's going down well in the community. And in fact, it does again tie into today because one of the reasons we wanted to write The Relaxed Author is because everyone gets so het up and anxious comparing themselves to others, trying to do things that don't fit with themselves. So that's out. Also, Tomb of Relics goes to my editor tomorrow. So I'm just finishing the edits. I've just printed it out all over again. It's like the 4th time. So I'm really over it. I'm at that over it stage, but that's happening. And I'm going on another pilgrimage, another long walk, these pandemic long walks. And I have pretty much decided I'm going to have a series of travel memoirs, and I'm planning that possibly under another brand, which would be crazy. But I'm thinking about these things, and maybe we'll talk about author branding in another session in next year or something, because I'm really have a lot of questions about that, even though I've been doing it so long. And what about you?
Yes, I'm finishing, and this will excite you, Joe, because you've been hand in hand with me through all of this. I am finishing my next novel. Woohoo! Almost there. On the final draft, and it's great being back here writing fiction where I'm happiest, but I'm also really interested in all that has happened in between, and why I couldn't have written this until now is kind of interesting to me. And I am sponsoring a story award, which I'd like to tell people about.
Yes, tell us.
the Green Stories Award. It's called. It's with the University of Southampton, and Denise Baden is an ally member, and she's super interested, as am I, in the potential of fiction to take the green message beyond the converted. So telling stories in which we get our focus off the problems and onto the solutions. And it's just at this point, just letting people know that it exists, and we'll let you know a little bit later in the year when it's actually open for entries. But if you have any interest in green topics and you have a good story, short story or novel, there's a short story prize as well. I'm sponsoring the novel prize. So yeah, think about the award, and maybe get writing that story if you haven't already.
Fantastic. Okay, so did you also want to mention, you said there, new phase, new website?
Oh yes, there's so much happening. I really feel like the last few months have been a whole new phase for me in terms of I haven't quite moved. I've one foot in London very much still, but I'm also spending a lot of time down at the coast, on the south coast here in England, and in St Leonard's on Sea, and everything changed at the same time. So I'm working on a new website as well, which is the last thing I needed to be doing in the middle. I have so many other things that seem more important, but when you just get to the stage where your website just feels like it does not represent you at any level anymore. So I should have a new website out next time we talk.
Oh, well, that's exciting. Well, yeah, we'll definitely have to put a branding thing on the list then, because I feel that this is the other thing where we are having the years of writing and publishing and all these different books and things, is that you do change. And what's nice is that we can keep changing, and as the world changes and we do, it's not, you don't have to stay in one box, which I think traditional publishing a lot of the time wants people to just stay in one genre or stay in one box, stay in one brand, and we can do different things. So let's talk more about that at some point, but let's get into today's topic, which is about focusing on your strengths as an indie author, ways to beat comparisonitis. So tell us a bit, like, what is comparisonitis?
It's really just comparing yourself to other people in an unfavorable way. So itis is short for fever, I think, isn't it? So it basically doesn't feel good. So it's 100% not only permissible but desirable, I think, to compare yourself to other people and to have models and to look at how other people are doing things. That's how we learn as indies. Very much so, but comparisonitis is where you look around you and you think other people have it easier, are doing better, getting more accolades, or selling more, writing better. You're comparing yourself to others, and in such a way that it's either stopping you completely in your tracks, or it's making you not feel good about what you do and how you're doing it, or it's making you copy people when actually they're not a good model for you. And it's pretty widespread in the community, I think. There are all sorts of assumptions all over the place that there's only one way to do things, or, people look at a successful person and say, I want what they have, and without looking and seeing, does it suit their way of doing things? So that's kind of my understanding of it. And ally member Lorna Ferguson was doing a survey among authors of things that held them back, and was very surprised to find that comparisonitis was up there, number one or number two, for most people. So that's what kind of spurred us to talk about it and decide to make a show out of it.
Yeah, and it came up in our relaxed author survey as well. We asked two questions, what stresses you out about being an author and what relaxes you. Those are the two questions. And yeah, the stress of comparing oneself to others is huge. But it's interesting because you mentioned there the importance of models and goals. And it's really hard to balance, because what you could say is, oh, well, I just won't look at anyone else. I won't look at what anyone else is doing. I'll just pull away from everything. I'll just be in my own little world. And that's not good either, because you want to know what's possible. What you need to do is, it's more like, don't put yourself down because you're not doing that. And that's what we're going to talk about in terms of changing the way you think about it. But it's also that on the other end, there's a sort of jealousy, which is also a negative emotion of, like you said, that person's doing better than me. But what we're really talking about here is when you just feel negative and small, and like there's a ladder and you're at the bottom, and that's the feeling we're trying to beat. And it comes up in loads of different ways. So for me, there's a couple of things I have that I still struggle with. One is the whole agents and publishers thing. As much as I love being an indie author and I'm very happy with my income and my writing life and everything, I still have that niggly, oh, well, I never got an agent. Well, I'd have had an agent, but, you know, I've never had a big publishing deal, and I've never done this. I've never won an award for my fiction, for example. And I put all these things on it where I'm somehow a lesser person or writer because I haven't achieved these things. And then within the indie space, for me, it's the ads. Why can't I just do ads myself without falling apart? But what about you? What do you have comparisonitis over?
I think for me, it's probably how long it takes me to write my fiction. In an indie world where people literally pump out books, and I know the books are different and all that kind of thing, but I have tried everything to write faster, and I stopped. And I'm so glad I stopped. And it's, of course, that ironic thing that when you stop pushing, you actually move faster. And I think that's the important thing about comparisonitis. One thing is the feeling that you have, and it's not nice to have feelings that are not positive, and we'll talk a bit later on about dealing with that. But the other thing is that for some people, and I think this is more serious, it hasn't stopped you in your tracks. It doesn't stop you doing what you love. You carry on. And same is true for me. I have kept on in my own way. At times it hasn't felt good because I feel like I should have. I look and I cannot believe how long it is since I put some fiction out, for example. And that does not feel good, but it doesn't stop me. It's when it actually becomes something, and I see a lot of people in the community where it just actually creates a huge stumbling block because they don't know what to do next, kind of paralyzed comparing themselves to other people. And I think that's where it gets pretty serious.
Yeah, so what we wanted to talk about today was strengths. And over the years, both of us have delved into knowing ourselves. I think knowing yourself is super important. And quite recently, Ally member and advisor Sasha Black put us on to doing Clifton Strengths Assessment. And I also want to shout out Becca Syme, who has Strengths for Writers program, and she's been on my podcast talking about it. And so you and I took the Clifton Strengths Assessment. And at the time, it was funny because we were like, oh, we'll just do it to shut Sasha up. But she kept saying to us, oh, you really must do this. It's amazing. We were like, yeah, we know ourselves. We're fine. And then we did it. And we were like, oh, that is very interesting. And it really helped me in a place where I've been struggling, which we'll talk about in a minute. But it's almost like I felt there was too much about myself that wasn't not right, but I felt uncomfortable. For example, let's talk about Ally and the fact that you do an amazing job at community. And I'm always feeling like, why am I so bad at community? Why can't I go to a writers group or join? People keep asking me to join these writing groups. I'm like, I'm just not a group type person, and yeah, I can be sociable or whatever, but I'm like, what is there something wrong with me that I can't do that? And I was also thinking, well, I need to stop doing all this futurist stuff because people really aren't interested and it's a waste of time, or should I go and get a job in the futurists kind of sector? So I was having all these questions about what to do, and then I did this strengths assessment and it's really helped. So should I go into my strengths, or have you got a sort of overarching thing first?
Well, for me, yeah, just to talk about, for me, tapping back into that whole thing about fiction writing, very often in the indie community, you'll hear the thing, productivity, not perfectionism, and that if you are being too, perfectionist, that you're being too picky, and it's a form of resistance, it's a form of being afraid and not wanting to put your stuff out there, and you know, I kind of didn't really feel that that was true, but nonetheless I began to wonder, was it true, because of the way in which things were kind of happening for me. So we did our strengths and you found that.
Yeah, so I found, so just to let people know, essentially you do this little thing and you say yes or no to all these questions and move these things around, and essentially it will come up with what are your strengths. So there's a whole load of things that are in a list, and we just talk about our top 5, which are like your best things, even though everything's on the list. So my top 5 were learner, intellection, strategic, input, and futuristic. And of course, we're not going to get into all the detail of these, but you can pretty much tell by these words. For me, learner, intellection, and input has helped me so much because, again, I can't sit down and write 10,000 words. And this year I have only, in inverted commas, written 1 novella for my fiction. And I've been like, why can't I just write 10,000 words a day like Lindsay Buroker? I struggle. Like, Lindsay's a friend of mine. I'm like, seriously, where does she get those ideas? And this has made me feel so much better because I'm like, well, I'm a learner and I need input. And the intellection is the thinking about things. And for me, that's the travel. I need to read and listen and experience in order to create. And that was kind of like a big weight lifted off my shoulders because I felt like, oh, well, then it's okay. My way of writing, which is heavy on the research and heavy on input, is part of my personality, and it's a strength, not a weakness. And then just to say briefly about the other 2, strategic and futuristic, I was like, well, there you go. Those are strengths of mine. So instead of thinking, oh, there's something wrong with me because I can't do the detail minutiae of ads, I need to say, yes, I'm strategic, futuristic, and I can see things that perhaps other people can't see, even though I can't do the things that some other people can do. So it became, this is a strength rather than a weakness. And it gave me the permission to basically just double down on those things and say, do you know how I feel when I do the future stuff? How I feel when I learn? That's what brings me alive. So why on earth would I try and get rid of those things? You know, again, tapping into those feelings of how I love to do stuff. So what about you? Tell us about yours.
Yeah, it was a very similar thing of having that permission. And, you know, I think there's something to be discussed sometime about permission as writers and as publishers. Who gives you permission? And, you know, and it's an ongoing thing. I used to think of it as something, somebody gives you permission, you know, once and off you go, because when you start being an indie author, very often you need that. You need somebody to say, yeah, it's okay to do this. You don't have to have a publisher, just go for it. But actually, permission is something you kind of have to give yourself over and over again, or, you know, somebody else, or the Clifton Strengths program gives it to you. And that's what hugely happened for me, because again, you know, I realized being a maximizer was my number 1, and that gave me the permission. It kind of said, no, that doesn't mean you are a picky perfectionist. It means that you lean into excellence, and that's okay. But you have to realize either that's going to take a lot longer time-wise, or else you have to ease off and realize that 80% is good enough. Which would you prefer? And like you, it actually makes me feel good to fiddle with it and not put it out there until it is ready. I was rushed into putting stuff out before from this feeling of I should be producing and 80% is good enough, but I didn't feel good about it and ended up actually withdrawing the books. So this just completely gave me permission to do that. And yeah, my other ones were strategic as well, ideation, positivity, and activator. And it's the combination of them, I think, is also the interesting thing about this Clifton Strengths program that is different, I think, from all. I love these. I'm a sucker for these kinds of things anyway, but I think it really is an excellent program in terms of understanding not just your strengths, but what was also interesting was weaknesses. Completely forget about them, let them go. Stop putting any energy into that. And maximizers are actually quite discerning about where they put their energy, but I think I was being kind of led to try and improve weaknesses rather than leaning into strengths. So that was the big outcome for me.
And out of yours, what do you think? I mean, obviously, the only one we share in our top 5 is strategic, which is so interesting to me too, because, you know, we've been friends for a decade. We think similarly in a lot of ways, but this also showed me why sometimes we do complement each other, because we are quite different in some of the, and we always known we're different in a lot of personality things. For example, I have been frustrated with the way that you do things sometimes where we've done stuff together, and now I'm like, oh, I see that it works that way. And it's actually helped me to feel a lot more patient, I think, with people, for example, who are not strategic thinkers. And I'm like, oh, right, their strength is in something else. And I can't just force someone else to think that way. All I can do is offer what I have out into the world, and people who are interested will listen, and people who aren't won't, and that's fine. And so it's to stop forcing myself into a different box, but also stop forcing other people into a box.
I think that's really, really important, and really, I mean, I learned a huge thing about you because all 5 of yours, as well as having the 21 different categories, they're in boxes. Influencer, strategic, and relationships are the 3 overall kind of categories, and all 5 of your strengths were in strategic. I bet that's a record.
It is quite funny, but also for me it was like, none of my top ones were in relationships, and that also helped me, because that explains this, why can't I be in a writing group, or, you know, why don't I want to be part of that? And of course, you know, I love being part of a community, but I want to be a bit of a step back from a community, whereas you're right in there. So what is it about your strengths there that you think have led into your ability to lead a community like Ally?
Yeah, I suppose I hadn't thought about that. All of them, actually, the combination of them, because mine, while yours were all 5 were in one area, mine was kind of balanced across the 3. Relationship was in my top 5. I had a relationship one in my top 5. I had 2 influencer ones and 2 strategic. So I think it's that probably the influencer wanting to influence how people perceive indie authors, how self-publishing develops, how people think about self-publishing was all very important in it. And also, you know, the thing you said about recognizing difference in other people, you know, we're too inclined when we meet difference to see it as a weakness, actually, because we like our own strengths. It's just human nature to be like that. But to see difference and strengths, I have found this really, really useful in terms of leading a team and in terms of leading Ally, just to understanding the team. The people that I work with, and seeing their strengths, being able to categorize them in my mind and say, they're, you know, that's positivity, I bet that's one of their strengths, you know, that kind of thing has been really, really good. So yeah, it's I guess we're recommending authors to do them if they have comparisonitis.
Oh yeah, and I think, and it's funny because when we talked about comparisonitis, so for example, the skill in inverted commas of writing a book a month, which is a skill, also is related to a type of personality type, but we don't know what that is, and it might be across all different strengths. But I think it's funny because we've ended up talking about personality strengths, whereas what we often get comparisonitis around are sort of skills, like writing fast. But I think that's what's so nice, is we can take a step back and say, okay, we think differently, therefore we can achieve differently as well.
And it's a much more creative way of thinking about it, really, when you realise what you're doing, because when you're looking at those other things, you're looking at the output, you're looking at the product and not the process. And always, in terms of growth for us as creators, as writers, as publishers, it's the process that does it. And that is something, you know, you develop your own particular process that suits your own personality. And that's, I think, a bit of a hole in the community at the moment. I don't think that people necessarily understand. They might understand their writing process. How many people in the community really understand their publishing process and what works best for them, or how it might be best for them to make their money? Because there are so many different models that you could make money at, but everybody's just thinking about one kind of model all the time.
Yes.
So there's a lot here, I think, to be unpacked, and yeah, hope to do that over the next year or so.
Yes, so you can just put in Clifton Strengths. It's only like $50 or something to take the test. I think it's Gallup, the company. Becca Syme's site, and again, I've interviewed Becca about this, but she also has coaching for authors to actually help people identify how those strengths will work best in the indie way of life and the indie way of writing and publishing. And so, yeah, I think it feels almost like one of those more maturation stages of indie, that we're now talking about this type of thing rather than just how-to information. And you can learn skills, but does it feel good, I guess, to do it? So I'm quite excited about that. So should we talk about some ways to beat comparisonitis? And again, the word beat is probably not what we mean anymore. It's probably just learning to live with it. I don't think it ever goes away. So I guess we've started, number one, understand and recognize your strengths. Obviously, we've talked about that. I also do want to mention the Myers-Briggs. I'm INFJ on the Myers-Briggs scale, and learning about that over a decade ago, understanding that I'm an introvert, that changed my life at that point, because I thought there was something wrong with me, that I couldn't be in a crowd, that I didn't want to talk to people for too long, that I found, video so tiring. And so I feel like understanding and recognizing our strengths is a process you have to keep going through, as we've talked about. And this won't be the end of it. There'll be lots more that we'll learn. But if you get to know yourself, then that will really help you.
Absolutely. And then the question of your weaknesses automatically rises with that. And so I think, coming out of that is very much about letting go of your weaknesses. And just before we let the Clifton Strengths thing go, one of the things I loved about it was the way it distinguished between those weaknesses, which you essentially can recognize by not liking them, not feeling good about them. But they also talk about the shadow side of your strength. So every strength that you have will also have a shadow side, and it can be worth just shining a bit of light on that and trying to integrate that into the strength, which is a different thing from letting go of things that you're just positively not ever going to enjoy.
So what's an example with one of yours of a shadow side that you thought was interesting?
Well, what I was talking about earlier on was that really the perfectionism and that it could be perfection. Perfectionism could become a problem, and it could become a pickiness, a kind of a fear, a resistance to letting go and to learning. So that once you make sure that that's not happening, you can accept the strength side of it, and that is different to say something, I'm never going to be a highly technical person. I'm never going to be somebody that gets stuck in at the detailed level of tech. So that's something I would just let go completely, which is not the same kind of weakness. Yeah.
And just on mine, the futurist one, which is what I'm excited about, that the shadow side or of that strength is that I go so deep down the rabbit hole and get so far ahead from other people that I don't bring people with me. So it was a really good thing, which basically said, look, you can get excited about these futurist things, but you have to then communicate this at certain levels in order to bring people along with you. Otherwise, you're just going to be all alone out there talking about things no one understands. And that's helped, because that's what I try and do on my futurist episodes of the podcast. And it's that understanding that other people aren't necessarily there yet in their thinking, and that's okay. So yeah, I found those really interesting. And just so people know, you get a report and it has all this stuff in, and I've printed it all out. I've got it on my desk and I sort of look at it now and then and think about it. There's a lot to think about, really, isn't there?
There's lots to think about, and it's a sort of unfolding. I think there are layers and different things that jump out at you when you've been doing it for a little while. So it's rich and it's multi-layered, as it should be, because we are all multifaceted human beings. One more thing on the weaknesses that I think is important to say. There are certain things, when I was talking a minute ago about not liking to do things, the thing that jumped straight into my mind was the number of indie authors who say they don't like marketing, for example. And that's not a weakness. That is a skill that you have to have as a publisher. It's simply one of the processes of publishing. And so you don't like it, but that there's a whole load of kind of thinking that goes around that, which can be unpicked. But also, if there are things that you specifically don't like, for example, for me, the minutiae of technology, I will never be somebody who uploads a podcast, for example, because that's just a waste of my time, because it would take me ridiculously long, and I'd probably, send it out backwards or something. But there are things you don't like to do, then you get other people to do them for you. And I think that's really, really important. I mean, I know you did that with your ads, didn't you? Because you don't like doing the ads.
Yes, so I think you're right. And marketing, as we know, marketing is not one thing. There are so many things that there are. And yes, so I pay someone to do my Amazon ads for my Joanna Penn non-fiction brand. And and for example, I don't normally do videos anymore. Like the video we do together is often it's like the only video I do now, because I made a decision that video is just so tiring for me that I would just double down on audio. So I'm not saying, I hate marketing in general. What I can say is I don't feel good trying to do the minutiae of ads, and I don't feel good doing video, but I will do other things. So again, all these aspects, there are all these different aspects that come into your personality, and you have to figure out what works best for you. Although Mark Leslie Lefebvre, my co-author, with The Relaxed Author, he is all over video and he's all over social media with all these little graphics and all of this, and it's brilliant because I don't do that. And he does that. So as you say, it's either paying someone to work with you, or if you have a collaborative relationship, then you can do that together. And actually it brings me to marriage. I'll just talk about it because Jonathan left his job 6 years ago to join the Creative Penn. And I think if we had done the strengths assessment together, we would have realized that wasn't going to work long term, because actually his strengths, he's even more strategic than I am. Wow. and neither one of us, I just wanted him to do all the detailed minutiae of ads and stuff. That's just not his skill. It's not his strength. And so you can't put people into these pigeonholes. You have to let people do the thing that is good for them. So finally, doubling down, we've got here, let it point the way. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I think, we have emotions about stuff. And so we were talking about our strengths, and very often when you're doing the things that you like doing, you kind of feel strong about it. But you feel good about it, but thinking specifically about comparisonitis and the feeling that arises when you compare yourself to a particular person, I think it's really worth going deeply into that and seeing what's behind it. So rather than just trying to suppress it or cut it away or say it's a bad thing and we shouldn't have it, and even trying to beat it, invite it to communicate with us and tell us. Because if you are feeling that bad and you're looking at somebody in particular who's making you feel that way, then there's gold there. There's actually a lot of information for you about the way you should go and the way you would like to go. So I think when you find that particular person or particular situation, just doing some free writing around it, just asking it what it is specifically about it that makes you feel bad, what you would like to be doing as a result. Is it a writing issue or is it a publishing? Sometimes we get very mixed up between those things. So we're kind of comparing ourselves to somebody around their success and their outcomes, but when we actually look at it, we're not even sure if they write the way we want to write, or is it a publishing thing or is it a writing thing? So yeah, I think it can be a really useful exploration tool to go a bit more deeply into the comparisonitis and what it might be trying to tell us.
Yes, so take notice. is the big thing. Take notice of how you're feeling. And then, as you say, is it really just a resistance to something in general that you can learn, or is it related to who you are as a person? Which, you have to double down on your strengths, which brings us to our final one. So it is then, once you've identified those strengths, to really look at doing more of that. So I'm embracing my future side. I'm attending all these conferences online and sort of putting that into how I'm communicating on my futurist episodes on my podcast, and basically giving myself permission, as we talked about the permission, to spend money on learning about things that can go into that area. That permission thing is probably the biggest side of it.
Yeah, really good. And I'm the same. I realized in doing it how much I had kind of got into a routine of the way that I did things. And for me also, it's about investing in myself and in excellence generally, and in searching out people who really stimulate me and, kind of grow how I'm thinking, and the sorts of just making the ideas pool much, much bigger. So in a sense, I feel I've been a little bit too kind of contained within our sector and our community over the last 10 years. And I think that did need to happen for those 10 years, but I now feel, and this has been part of that, very much about, so a twin sort of a thing. On the one hand, leaning into, as I said, excellence and reaching out to other people who can stimulate growth in me, but also paying attention to things that I might have before just kind of brushed aside and said, no, can't go there, don't think, just do, get on with it kind of thing, don't look right, don't look left. So there's been a kind of a reaching out and a going in, which has been, I think, very enriching already. And I don't really know what's going to come out of it, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, it almost feels like this is a new start, or a reboot, or something where we're moving into, we've talked about moving into new phases. I also think that maybe that's where we are because of the pandemic. We're at more than 18 months now of pandemic times, and as we start to emerge, I think we really are starting to emerge in a lot of countries. We are looking to reassess and figure out what we want for the next stage. I've also hit a decade full time. You had a big birthday last year, and I feel like there's a lot of things that people are thinking right now as to how we move forward. And again, like I mentioned, the maturation of the indie space. We're established now. We're part of the creator economy. It's time to start looking at what's next, I guess, and also it's the decade of Ally, right, in 2022. Yeah.
Yes, I agree with you completely. It's all of those things. And I think each individual indie has this kind of multifaceted personality. And I think the indie author community is this huge, broad church of all sorts of personalities. And it is definitely a sign of maturity to begin to really allow ourselves to distinguish these things in that way. So I think it's a very positive time for our community as well, because we are very well placed now to cope with the kinds of things that are coming down the track, much better placed than authors who haven't ever self-published, and other people who are still kind of looking or operating within a world that still does exist there, the traditional way of doing things, for want of a better way to talk about it. And we see that at the societal level as well. I think, Brexit comes in there, and the changes in the US come in there. There's so much going on worldwide that we as a community feed into. And as writers, obviously, all of that is grist for the mill.
Indeed. And as ever, we are excited about moving forward and moving on, and we're not going anywhere. We're still enjoying our journey, which I think is also exciting, because sometimes it can feel, I was feeling a while back that it was all getting a bit stale, and now I feel quite reinvigorated for the next steps. So what's coming up this month? Just remind people of what's coming up.
Yeah, we've got SelfPubCon and selfpublishingadviceconference.com. You can go there to register for 3 free days of wonderful presentations on the whole topic of writing craft. We don't normally double down on writing in Ally. We're normally all about the publishing, but this time it's all about the craft of writing. And yeah, it's always a great 24 hours live to you wherever you are in the world for some part of the day. And we've got just fantastic speakers who are talking about all aspects of writing craft and setting up your publishing process to reflect your writing craft and to bring out the best in your writing as well.
Fantastic.
What have you got coming up?
Well, I'm doing my my next pilgrimage, and I'll be back in edits with Tomb of Relics and lots of sort of. I feel like I've got quite a productive end of year. It felt like a lot of this year was not good for many reasons. And now I feel like I've got a last sort of whoosh of energy in this sort of last quarter, which is a relief, to be honest. But in November, our topic, our next month, is going to be new opportunities and technologies for authors, which is a bit of a catch-all. And we'll be talking about lots of new things that have been happening and that we're excited about as we move into almost 2022, which is kind of crazy. So yes, that will be next month.
Fantastic. Yeah, which follows on really nicely from our topic this month of looking forward and growing into the future. So yeah, great. Look forward to seeing you all then. Until then, happy writing.
And happy publishing. Bye.
You've been listening to the Ask Ally Advanced Self-Publishing Salon with Ally Director Orna Ross and Joanna Penn of thecreativepenn.com. I'm Howard Lovey, keeping you up to date with the fast-changing choices and challenges of self-publishing. Our Advanced Self-Publishing Salon is brought to you by specialist sponsor Ingram Spark, an award-winning indie publishing platform that offers authors like you a way to publish your book and share it with over 39,000 bookstores and libraries worldwide. It's your content. Do more with it. We would like to thank Ingram for their support for this show. The Self-Publishing Advice Podcast is a weekly show from Ally, the Alliance of Independent Authors. Find more author advice, tips, and tools at our Self-Publishing Advice Center, selfpublishingadvice.org. And if you haven't already, we invite you to join our organization and become a self-publishing ally. You can do that at allianceindependentauthors.org. Now, what are you waiting for? Go write and publish.